Yes.
Perfect. Great. So again, my name is Heidi Olson. I'm a criminal justice planner, and I primarily work with the vocational training happening within our 13 adult correctional institutions. Education is based out of the Reentry Education and Vocational Services Unit under the Division of Health and Rehab Services within DOC. So today I'm excited to be here to talk about the training and the interventions that DOC is able to provide those in our care and custody to hopefully allow them to leave better prepared to enter the workforce upon release. And I'll also preface by saying that it's been a while since I gave a public presentation to a group this large, so if I stutter a little bit, my apologies. So we'll start with what is to me a really interesting statistic. Did any of you know that right here, right now, as it stands in this very minute, roughly 3% of the adult population residing in Alaska is directly involved with Alaska's judicial system, and by virtue of that involvement, involved also with Alaska Department of Corrections. This includes people awaiting trial, as well as those actively serving sentences in DOC's 13 prisons and 7 community residential centers, as well as those participating in electronic monitoring and pretrial parole and probation supervision out in the community. Over the last 5 years, DOC has averaged between 27 and 28,000 intake admissions, maintained an average prison population of around 4,500 individuals, and discharged approximately 2,000 people per year back into the community. Statistically speaking, those figures aren't great, and I'm sure many of us have seen the statistics comparing Alaska to other states. Compared to other states and U.S. territories and the national average, Alaska does have one of the highest per capita rates of arrest and incarceration in our nation. That said, the majority of those entering DOC custody for whatever reason will end up back in communities across the state, and in this have the opportunity to ultimately participate in the workforce again and positively contribute back to their communities. Participation participation in the workforce with which they're then able to pay fines or restitution, support themselves, support their families, establish stability and a purpose, and ultimately, again, have a positive impact back in their local communities. Because DOC houses such a diverse population hailing from and returning to all areas of the state, DOC is uniquely positioned to connect individuals with rehabilitative programming and specialty training to fill labor gaps in multiple sectors across the state. Ultimately, research shows that reentrants' ability to engage with the workforce after release is one of the main contributors to desistance, or the act of staying out of incarceration after release, and the opposite of recidivism. Recidivism being the act of returning to incarceration post-release. Here in Alaska, it's important to note that our recidivism definition is a little bit different than that of other states. There is no nationally established definition of recidivism, but when we're talking about recidivism in Alaska, we're talking about the act of returning to incarceration for any reason within 3 years of discharge from the system. That could be for parole and probation violations, as well as the act of committing an additional crime or having new charges brought. So that is to say that employers and really everyone who wants to live in a safer, healthier Alaska has a vested stake when it comes to giving folks with criminal records the chance to work and participate in the Alaskan workforce. The long story short is that we know Alaska is facing a labor crisis. I think it's fair to say that most people on the call today see the impacts of that labor shortage every day. The justice involved and previously justice involved demographic has the potential to help fill some of those gaps, and fostering fair chance or second chance hiring practices when possible has significant potential to improve the socioeconomic outcomes for everyone. Going forward and throughout this presentation, my main motives are to share more about the opportunities for rehabilitation that those in DOC care and custody have access to, and share a little bit more about how Alaska DOC prepares the justice-involved individuals to be great candidates for employment post-release. Before we get too far into programmatics, I wanted to take a few minutes to explain what DOC is, or what corrections means here in Alaska. DOC's overarching mission, and you can find this also listed on our website, is to provide secure confinement, reformative programs, and a process of supervised community reintegration to enhance the safety of our communities. To accomplish this mission, the department is separated into 4 divisions: the Division of Administrative Services, Division of Health and Rehab Services, more commonly referred to as HARS, and the division I'm speaking to you here today from, the Division of Institutions, which includes all of the state's correctional facilities, as well as community residential centers, or DOC-sanctioned transitional living communities, and the Division of Pretrial, Parole, and Probation, more commonly referred to as DP3. DOC also includes the state's parole board, which operates sort of often on its own. Alaska is one of 6 states that employs a unified corrections model, meaning our DOC facilities take on the role of community jails. Our facilities are where people come when initially engaging with law enforcement and communities. State and federal prisons all under the same roof. Important to note when we're talking about DOC and corrections for our purposes today, DOC in Alaska refers only to Alaska's adult corrections system for justice-involved individuals aged 18 and older. Underage offender corrections and their management falls under the Division of Juvenile Justice under the Department of Health and Social Services. When referring to justice involvement or an individual's movement through the Alaska judicial system, it's also important for us all to understand what that process can generally look like, but also how that process can vary. Not everyone has the same experience with DOC or the process of releasing back into the community. Generally speaking, and as someone who's had a relatively short tenure at DOC, I just crossed over my 2-year mark, I think it's fair to say that when most people picture judicial involvement, they picture a relatively linear process. A person is referred to charges, they go to court, they go to prison, they might go to a halfway house, and then ultimately they go back home or release into a normal routine within the community. But that's not always the case. Well, it can be the case for some people. Charges do not always mean the person will go or has gone to prison, and a prison sentence does not always mean a person must participate in ongoing monitoring when they return home. Just like the rest of us, our population's situations and needs are unique. For our purposes today, our discussion is going to focus primarily from the lens of the REVS unit, Reentry Education and Vocational Services unit, under the Division of Health and Rehab Services. Our work primarily translates to action within the Division of Institutions, primarily in those 13 adult correctional institutions, or this phase, if it's a little bit easier to picture. This isn't to discredit or discount the incredible work of our field probation staff, our officers, and what's going on in our transitional living communities. This is just where we typically find that DOC has the most ability to deliberately impact change. This is where folks that are involved with our judicial system are spending the most time, and this is where we have the greatest capacity to enhance a person's environment and make opportunities available. As we delve into education, vocational training, just keep in mind that this is just one phase of judicial involvement and from the lens of just one of the factions of DOC. And if you're interested in more information associated with other parts of DOC, we can of course connect you to those respective factions in the future. So again, just to recap, DOC operates 13 adult correctional facilities across the state, housing sentenced and unsentenced folks at varying security levels. All of those facilities employ at least one full-time education coordinator who's responsible for delivering a set of defined core educational offerings. Those include basic education, preparing folks for in-house GED testing, English as a second language, parenting programs. DOC presently offers 2 parenting programs of varying duration, both of which are recognized by OCS and the Alaska court system. Additionally, reentry classes and computer literacy are available in all of our DOC facilities. Those in larger facilities with more static incarcerated demographics are also trained to provide cognitive behavioral change or thinking for a change. Education coordinators can then additionally be credentialed to provide some workforce development type programming to include the Alaska Food Handler Card and the Department of Labor's Seafood Processing Orientation, CPR, first aid, and some other classes as their tenure and departmental resources allow. In addition to direct instruction, these staff members are also coordinating visits with specialty training providers and contractors, sometimes volunteers and other community members visiting the facility. Our ed coordinators compile all of our facility reports and participate in other institutional duties as needed. For those of you that have been involved with any of our institutions, you've likely worked with an education coordinator. Worth noting is that Alaska state statute requires all programs delivered by DOC to be evidence-based. All curricula utilized is heavily scrutinized for efficacy in our offices here in the REVS unit, as well as throughout the other factions of health and rehabilitative services, and through institutional leadership for efficacy and relevance, specifically for those incarcerated in Alaska. DOC educational offerings are reviewed, approved, and assessed for fidelity by the Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Education, Alaska Department of Labor, and the Department of Commerce as applicable. And what I mean to say with that very long-winded last sentence is that the programs we're offering in our facilities are, in most cases, equal in fidelity, in terms of rigor, in terms of content taught to their counterparts in the community. 6 of DOC's larger facilities, primarily those located in South Central Alaska and housing predominantly sentenced populations, are able to supplement core educational offerings with dedicated vocational training spaces and additional full-time staff. Historically, DOC has utilized the National Center for Construction Education and Research, otherwise known as NCER or NCCER, curriculum as the backbone for most of our vocational offerings, targeting primarily construction technologies type career pathways over the past couple decades. More recently, as DOC population demographics have shifted and local labor market needs have changed, DOC has relied more heavily on specially credentialed contractors and industry partners to supplement and diversify training opportunities and meet local employers' needs for skilled labor. We're proud to have formally partnered with the Department of Labor to insert local job center employment specialists into our facilities on a regular basis to provide employment-focused workshops and support for folks preparing to re-enter the community. The Department of Education has been a great partner as well in providing support for the integration of the carpentry unions, career connections, pre-apprenticeship programs into our facilities over the past year. And in speaking of unions, while DOC has greatly benefited from partnership with the Alaska Iron Workers, shout out to John Woodard on this call, we're excited to also have recently solidified partnership with the Alaska chapter of the Carpentry Union and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers to better align our training with local labor market needs and more directly connect reentrants to employment and employers post-release. All of that said, DOC understands that to fully bridge the gap between this training and actual employment, and statistically speaking, provide the best chance at long-term desistance for those currently in our care, including employers in these type of conversations, and actively inviting employers to be involved in training and rehabilitation is key. I'll put the shameless plug out there right now, and we'll revisit this point later on. But one of the REVS unit's large goals for 2025 is to reinvigorate the in-reach events that were more commonly held prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2025, our goal is to bring in more community partners, including rehabilitative organizations and organizations focused directly with reentry, but also employers into our institutions to engage with our folks prior to release, hopefully connect folks with the training they need or encourage folks to pursue training while still incarcerated, and give some direction as to how exactly to get engaged with the workforce post-release. Here you'll see a more complete menu of the supplemental, more targeted vocational training and workforce development type programming available throughout the DOC system. I should note that not every single class is available in every single facility. Class availability is based on instructor availability, respective facilities demographics, and when I say facility demographics, I mean, for example, longer classes are primarily offered in larger, predominantly sentenced facilities where students are more likely to be able to complete classes, where students are not going to be pulled as often for court visits or legal matters. And shorter duration classes, or those more applicable to a broader audience, are going to be made more available to all of our facilities, particularly those with larger unsentenced and more transient populations. Space availability within the institution, and of course, departmental finances are also going to impact where classes are offered and how many cycles of particular classes are able to be offered. Looking at that list, you'll notice DOC is presently prioritizing vocational training. You'll notice that our presently prioritized offering of vocational training aligns with the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor's statistics related to current and projected job growth in the next 5 and 10 years, as well as Alaska's workforce future plan. So the Department of Labor has defined areas of greatest workforce shortage in fields generally associated with construction trades, hospitality, mechanics, and manufacturing. And so in response, we've tailored the training offerings that we're providing this year and in coming years to match and hopefully give our folks the best chance for employment post-release. Additionally, 2 of our DOC facilities, Wildwood Correctional in Kenai and Spring Creek Correctional in Seward, offer Department of Labor accredited full-length apprenticeship programs. These apprenticeships, baking, culinary arts, building maintenance, repair, and warehousing, require students to demonstrate specific skills competency, as well as participate in a defined total hours of on-the-job training, just like their counterparts in the community. Over the past year, DOC has partnered with the Alaskan chapter of the Carpentry Union, as I'd mentioned, to train DOC vocational instructors to deliver the union's Career Connections pre-apprenticeship program, preparing students to apply and interview for apprenticeship upon release. Currently, the Carpentry Pre-Apprenticeship Program is available in all 6 facilities, housing vocational spaces and employing full-time vocational instructors. In 2025, one new coming program that I'm very excited about is partnership with the Alaska Joint Electrical Apprenticeship Training Trust through the IBEW that will provide a similar electrical pre-apprenticeship program in 3 facilities. Those classes will be delivered by IBEW members and mirror programs available through Alaska Works partnerships. Here you'll see a menu of behavioral health supports offered within DOC facilities. Well, I know it's not explicitly tied to workforce development. I think we all know that it's difficult to come to work and do a good job if you're stressed or bringing excessive emotional load to work. Statistically speaking, the justice-involved population is also far more likely to have been lacking some of these supports prior to incarceration. We'll throw in a somewhat morbid fun fact. Did you know that Alaska DOC is the #1 provider of healthcare in Alaska? We offer greater access to mental health services. We provide more appointments throughout any given year than are provided within the community. And while that might be a somewhat questionable statistic, it also indicates the huge opportunity that DOC has to make a significant impact and really truly support rehabilitation of those in our care and custody. We won't spend a ton of time here on this slide, but I think it's important to give some brief recognition to the healthcare teams within HARS, as well as to incarcerated learners committed to truly holistic rehabilitation, as demonstrated by their participation not only in education, vocational training, but also in some of these mental and cognitive support programs. So to this point, we've focused primarily on the opportunities incarcerated adults have been afforded to prepare themselves for employment while incarcerated. This last chunk of the presentation will primarily focus on that bridge I mentioned earlier between the reentry preparation while incarcerated and actual reintegration into the community, highlighting the services DOC reentry, or the R in our REVS unit acronym, can provide to reentering individuals, and the support available to employers through both DOC and the Department of Labor. To touch on DOC's reentry services, I'm going to pass it over to John Postotnik to discuss a little bit more about what the reentry side of the REVS unit can provide to reentrants and prospective employers.
Thanks, Heidi, and good morning, everyone. A few familiar names over there in the participant list. Good to see everyone. So yeah, I'm just gonna really quickly go through some of the reentry support that my team can offer. Let me point out first that reentry support happens across the department in a lot of different ways, and so we kind of fit into one part of it. It's not just limited to our team. So there's staff located at all the facilities around the state, staff located in the communities across the state that are also supporting reentry. But what we can do through our budgets and through our position in HARS is we do have some funding available that is geared towards providing really like kind of the basics, the lowest of safety net services. So if someone submits a request for support through our team, we're in a position to help with transitional housing on a very limited basis. And I'm talking about paying for maybe a month's rent or a program fee. We've assisted with transportation. These are bus passes if you have a bus system. Sometimes it's taxis or transportation tokens, depending on where you're at. We've assisted with a lot of clothing vouchers, where someone could go to, say, like Fred Meyer or Big Ray's, or we have a couple other businesses that we've connected with where someone could go in and get some basic clothing if they have nothing, and some basic hygiene items. We've purchased cell phones and distributed them out to probation offices around the state for, we're giving them the opportunity to disperse them as needed to people that they're working with that have released that might need a phone. I think everyone on this call probably understands the importance of being connected. And some people simply don't have that when they release. We've assisted in the past with tools. Tattoo removal is something we've been interested in. And for me, that ties back to someone's ability to kind of integrate into the community and also obtain employment. I think stigma around tattoos has diminished. However, there are people exiting our correctional system that might have some offensive tattoos, and it's in everybody's best interest to get those off if that person wants that. So that's something we've tried to build out here in Anchorage. And then so that's kind of one piece that runs through our office. We're also situated to work with a lot of the community organizations that are supporting reentry around the state. There's several grants that are kind of floating around that go out to community providers. And so our team really works hard to get connected with those programs, those support staff that work in the community once people get released. Like Heidi mentioned, we try to work with the facilities to do the in-reach piece so that we can help build those connections pre-release and help make those connections. Sometimes we're talking about like paperwork and applications, but it's also about knowledge and understanding that there is support in a given community or in a particular area. So we're trying to facilitate that as best we can. And I think I'll leave it at that. I could probably do a whole presentation on reentry and spend all day on it. So I'll pause there and let Heidi kind of move through the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, John.
Actually, before we do that, there was a question in the chat, and I was wondering if Hadassah, you would like to come off and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. And actually, I do know Jonathan in the digital equity space that we had met in previously. So, hey, Jonathan, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I was curious on that digital literacy, the digital education, and that part. Is that something you guys are implementing or have found a way to bring that program in with the grant funds that are incoming?
So what I'll say is that our team has been looking at that, the Alaska Digital Equity Grant, and we're hoping to put an application in. One of the things, it's a real challenge with the Department of Corrections in terms of access to technology. There's some state laws that prohibit internet access, and so it puts limitations on some of the programming that we're able to offer around digital literacy. And there's some rules that are kind of outside our control. However, we are interested as a department and to try to find some other solutions to address this and some other workarounds. So we do have it's Technomedia. There is some programming that's available to help students and learners kind of get familiar with computer applications and build up some of their skill set when it comes to working on a computer and things like that. But I think there's definitely area for improvement or enhancement when it comes to the digital literacy piece, the way that it's being sort of conceptualized and made available to the communities. So it's something we're looking at for sure.
Awesome.
And please add anything else that I might have missed, Heidi.
Nope, I think you touched on the big points presently. Like John said, our digital literacy program is executed through Technomedia. To expand upon that a little bit, Technomedia includes a suite of guided tutorials, activities, and assessments over the use of the Microsoft Office suite, basic internet browsing, safe internet browsing, and general computer function as well. It also offers a typing program. So it is pretty basic, but right now, particularly given that we can't provide access to students to the internet in the realm of offline programs, it's a pretty comprehensive program, and it's a start. As John mentioned, we are actively engaged in conversations about digital equity, about some of the state and federal funding coming down for digital equity initiatives, and we're excited about the potential that'll give us to expand programming opportunities, including those targeting digital literacy for our folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So I'm sorry, I can't see the chat. Were there any additional questions before I carry on? Take that as a no.
Sorry, I was on mute. I just wanted to chime in that there was a comment from Brad Billings from the Department of Education about the social and emotional employability skills. He just wanted to make that comment that is foundational to workforce and career development. So nice job to the DOC.
Thanks, Brad. And again, if there are additional questions about mental health, about behavioral health supports that DOC provides, we're happy to put you into contact with the correct people within DOC. John and I are well housed in health and rehabilitative services, aren't directly involved with healthcare. So if there are additional questions or follow-ups, we're happy to connect you to those people. So carrying on, we're going to give a quick shout out to our friends over at the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. In addition to the services that John has mentioned and that I've touched on that DOC provides in our 13 correctional institutions, the Department of Labor is available to folks while they are incarcerated as well as upon release to support entry into the workforce and reintegration into the community. The Department of Labor offers direct and indirect support primarily through the job centers. Prospective employees can stop into their local job center and work with an employment specialist to determine their needs. From there, the Department of Labor is able to provide training or connect that candidate with accredited training and potentially cover the costs associated with program enrollment, tools, or other necessities needed while the candidate initially prepares for work and gets into the job that they have worked hard to get. The employment specialist then also assists with employment applications, preparing for interviews, and preparing for the first days on the job. Department of Labor can further support employers through the Fidelity Bonding Program, an insurance program, if you will, that provides reimbursement for costs to employers should a job candidate not work out and not make it through the first few months of their employment or make it through a probationary period. Similarly, the conditional hiring program managed through the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation provides on-site support through training for qualified workers with special needs. At the federal level, justice-involved individuals are identified as a disenfranchised labor demographic, qualifying employers for the Work Opportunity Tax Credit when filing federal income taxes. While the Department of Labor doesn't directly acquire this benefit for employers, the DOL website, Job Center staff, and other Department of Labor staffs are able to provide additional information about work opportunity tax credits and some of these supplemental programs and support programs available for employees and employers. So in conclusion, we all are impacted on a daily basis by the ongoing labor shortage in the state, a shortage that at this time is really only expected to worsen as more jobs are created in this state. We also know that roughly 7,000 Alaskans will be leaving incarceration this year after having access to legitimate educational programs, workforce development opportunities, and other rehabilitative programs. This brings us to my final question for the group, or final statement, if you will, but could a justice-involved individual be considered when recruiting new talent for your organization? Could this demographic fulfill some of your labor shortage? And could this population fill the gap within your organization? I'm going to throw out again here the shameless plug that DOC is looking to increase employer engagement within our facilities. We're really striving to be a good partner as we rebuild some of our workforce development opportunities in the post-pandemic world. And we really, again, invite employers in to engage with our population, learn more about the training available within our facilities, and help promote the idea of being a productive member of the workforce to our population. Right now, we have a couple in-reach events scheduled, and the Revs unit is working to get more of these type of events on the calendar. If you're interested in being a part of the March 5th event at Highland Mountain Correctional in Eagle River, our women's facility, or the event in Juneau at Lemon Creek Correctional in August, please feel free to contact me or John. Or if you'd like to be added to a list in the future, we're happy to do that as well. And we'll end with just throwing our contact information up on the screen. Additional information is also available on the DOC website, and I would encourage everyone to check it out. John spent quite a lot of time lately making sure that it's up to date and accurately reflects the current vision of the Revs unit. So with that, I appreciate your time. I'll leave this up here for a couple seconds yet and then stop sharing and check out the chat and see if there's anything in there. Otherwise, please feel free to holler out questions.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And I really appreciate you asking us the question, would we consider this population for some of our workforce shortage issues. We have a comment from Vandana. She says, thank you for your presentation, Heidi and Jonathan. If you know of Matsu residents in your program, the Matsu Health Foundation has scholarship for Matsu residents pursuing careers in healthcare. And there's a link in the chat. And then Margie is asking if you could share what happens at the in-reach events. And I'll just give you just a minute to answer that question. And if there's more, we'll hold it for the end at Q&A so we can give our friends at the ALP a chance to get started on the presentation.
That's a great question. And it's the activities within those in-reach events are being reworked if you had been a part of those events prior to the pandemic a little bit, hopefully to make the process a little bit more efficient for employers and more efficient for everyone. So what those events typically look like is we host them in a gym or a large communal space within the facilities. Really, they probably look pretty similar to job fairs or informational sessions happening in K-12 or post-secondary institutions of education. We set up all of our partnering organizations with a table or a booth, typically around the perimeter of a large space. And then we take a few minutes to introduce each organization individually. We give each organization a chance to introduce the services they provide or employment opportunities available. And then we provide some time for our residents to mill around, to connect with particular organizations and employers, ask questions, and engage in conversations more applicable to their specific situation. So that's the quick rundown. John, is there anything you wanted to add with the re-envisioning of in-reach events?
Just that there are instances, depending on the facility and who's going in, that it could be some very small number of people in like a classroom, right? So if you're targeting veterans, there's not as many veterans in a given facility, so you'd sort of stick them in an educational room, and you might have one or two speakers, and then they could just chat and discuss and present on whatever service the visitor has to offer. So it's a little bit variable in terms of like what it actually looks like, but bottom line is it's a opportunity for incarcerated people to get information and engage with people from the community, and to help build connections and understanding about what resources or supports could be available post-release generally. So what we're kind of talking about, but as we move forward, I'd love the idea of trying to do more engagements with employers, do like connections to job opportunities. There's other jurisdictions where people will apply for jobs while they're incarcerated, so that when they leave the incarceration, they'll have a job to go to. We're not there yet, but I would love to like build that capacity and move that direction, where we're really giving people something a little bit more tangible, rather than just like, hi, I'm here for when you get out. Like, we could line some things up for folks and build out this space when it comes to employment. But we're moving in that direction. Not quite there yet.
Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks for asking that question.